The streetlights flickered like they were about to die, casting long, broken shadows across the empty road. We weren't talking, just walking side by side, her heels clicking softly on the pavement while my sneakers scraped against the concrete. It was one of those nights when the silence feels heavier than words. I was replaying the laughter from earlier, her bright smile when she was with her friends, wondering why it felt so different when she was with me. Then her phone buzzed. She didn't even hesitate, just pulled it out and glanced at the screen while still walking, like I wasn't right there. I caught a glimpse. Just a glimpse. It was enough to rip me apart. Still thinking about your lips last night. I need more. Unknown. I swear I stopped breathing. My steps faltered, and I felt this cold spike of panic stabbing through my chest. She didn't see me notice. She didn't even look back. She just smiled down at her screen, that small, secret smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I wanted to grab the phone right there. I wanted to scream, demand answers, demand anything. But my voice wouldn't work. My brain felt like it was on fire, and all I could do was watch her type something back, her fingers moving fast, like muscle memory. A car passed us slowly, its headlights washing over us for a second, and in that brief flash of light, I saw her expression change, soft, almost guilty, but not enough to make her stop. That was when I realized something had already shifted between us long before tonight. By the time we reached our street, my chest was tight, like I'd swallowed a brick. I felt stupid, angry, and yet somehow frozen. My hand almost reached for hers out of habit, but I pulled it back. She didn't notice. I knew one thing. I couldn't unsee that message. I couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. But I also couldn't bring myself to ask her. Not yet. Not until I was sure I could handle the answer. When we got home, Clara tossed her shoes in the hallway and disappeared into the kitchen like nothing happened. I stood by the door, still frozen, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. I wanted to ask her about the message, but the words stuck like glue in my throat. She was humming, pouring herself a glass of water, scrolling on her phone again. I couldn't help but stare, trying to guess if he was messaging her right now, if that soft little grin on her face had anything to do with me anymore. I kept telling myself that maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe lips was some inside joke I didn't get. But that sentence didn't sound innocent. Not even close. And the way she typed back, quickly, like she had to hide it from me, was tearing me apart. Later that night, she fell asleep next to me, her breathing steady and peaceful, like she didn't have a single secret in the world. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a stranger in my own bed. I reached for her phone once, my fingers hovering just inches above it, but I stopped. What if I saw something I couldn't unsee? What if I found proof and my whole life came crashing down in 1 second? Instead, I stared at her, at this woman I thought I knew better than anyone, and I felt my stomach twist. Every little detail from the past few weeks started coming back to me. The late-night work calls, the extra time in the shower, the way she suddenly started dressing up even when we were just going to the store. I had ignored all of it, convincing myself I was just paranoid. Now, I wasn't so sure. At some point, I dozed off, but I woke up around 3 a.m. to the faint glow of her phone. She wasn't asleep anymore. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, whispering into her phone with the voice of someone who didn't want to be heard. I stayed still, my eyes barely open, listening to fragments of her voice. Soft laughs. A long silence. Then, I can't stop thinking about it either. It was like a knife twisting in my gut. My hands trembled so badly I had to clench them into fists under the blanket just to keep from shaking. She finished her call and slipped back into bed like nothing happened. I pretended to stay asleep, but every second after that felt like an eternity. I knew I couldn't go on like this. Something inside me was cracking, and I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. Clara was already in the kitchen, making coffee, humming to herself like nothing in the world was wrong. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, and for a brief moment, I wondered if I'd imagined the entire night. If that whispering phone call, that message, all of it was just a nightmare caused by too much stress. But then I saw her phone, carelessly left on the counter, and my stomach turned. It was like a trapdoor in my chest opened, and I knew I had to see. I'm not proud of what I did next, but something in me snapped. She left her phone unlocked when she stepped into the bathroom. My heart was beating like a war drum as I grabbed it, my thumb shaking while I scrolled through her messages. It felt like I was holding a bomb that could go off at any second. And then I saw him, Eli. Just seeing his name there made me feel like the floor had dropped out from under me. The thread was filled with messages that made my hands tremble. I can still taste you. I can't stop thinking about last night. You make me feel alive again. I almost dropped the phone. There was one message from her that I can't get out of my head. It said, "I don't know how long I can keep this up without him noticing." That him was me. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The room started spinning. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall, to storm into the bathroom and scream at her, but instead, I put it back exactly where I found it, sat down at the table, and pretended to be scrolling on my own phone when she came out. My hands were cold, clammy, my heart still racing. She smiled at me, handed me a cup of coffee, and I swear it was the most hollow smile I'd ever seen. I stared at her, wondering who she really was, because the woman standing there wasn't the same Clara I thought I married. My head was full of noise, questions, anger, betrayal, but I said nothing. I was too scared of what would come out if I opened my mouth. That entire day, I couldn't stop replaying her messages with him. Every little moment we'd shared together, our wedding, our road trips, the quiet mornings, suddenly felt fake, like I'd been living with a stranger all along. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way she checked her phone every few minutes, how she smiled when she typed, like she was in on some secret joke I'd never be a part of. Every laugh, every glance, felt like a dagger. By the time night fell, I'd made up my mind. I couldn't just sit here drowning in questions anymore. I needed to know how deep this went, and if I had to burn myself to the ground to find out, so be it. I started making a plan, nothing crazy, just small things, like noticing when she left her phone unattended or checking our shared credit card statements for anything suspicious. But in the back of my mind, I knew that this was only the beginning. I think the worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was how normal everything looked on the outside. She laughed with me, kissed me on the cheek, even asked what I wanted for dinner, all while I knew what she was hiding. I went to bed that night feeling like I was lying next to a stranger who could destroy me with one more secret message. The following days were pure torture. Every morning, Clara acted as if everything was perfect, smiling, sipping her coffee, sending those innocent little texts to her friends. But I knew the truth now, or at least part of it, and it was eating me alive from the inside. I couldn't just sit there pretending anymore. So I started watching her. Closely. Maybe too closely. Every time her phone buzzed, I felt my heart lurch like I was about to witness my own execution. I started memorizing the times she left the room, the moments she stepped outside to take calls, the way her expression softened when she read certain messages. It wasn't paranoia anymore, it was war. One night, when she fell asleep early after a long shower, I did something I swore I'd never do. I carefully unlocked her phone while her breathing was steady and deep, and I went further into those messages with Eli. My hands were trembling, my chest tight, but I couldn't stop. Their conversation wasn't just flirty, it was intimate, filled with memories of places they'd been, things they'd done. I read one line from her that made me feel like I'd been stabbed. I think about that night more than I should. I can't forget how you made me feel. I dropped the phone on the bed for a moment, my pulse racing, and I swear I almost threw up. But here's the thing that really scared me. It wasn't just words. They had photos. Not the kind you think, but small, innocent ones that felt worse because they weren't supposed to be intimate. Him taking a picture of her coffee mug, a shot of his watch on her wrist, a blurry selfie of them smiling somewhere I didn't recognize. I didn't know when or where those photos were taken. Were they recent? Had she been sneaking off while I was at work? The more I read, the more I felt like I was unraveling. I put the phone back exactly as I found it, but my mind wouldn't let it go. I started imagining them together every time Clara left the house. I began checking the car mileage, looking for receipts in her purse, like some obsessed detective who couldn't stop digging. I hated myself for it, but I hated the thought of being in the dark even more. Then something strange happened that shook me to my core. On Wednesday night, while Clara was in the shower, her phone buzzed with a message from Eli that read, "He doesn't suspect anything, does he?" I felt my knees go weak. He was talking about me. They were both aware I was the clueless fool in the middle of their game. I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped outside to breathe, pacing under the cold night sky, my thoughts spiraling. I knew I had two choices, confront her and risk everything blowing up right there, or keep digging until I had the full story. And the thing is, as much as it destroyed me, I needed to know everything. I wasn't ready to walk into a confrontation with only half the truth. So I made up my mind. The next day, I was going to follow her. I didn't care how low it made me sink. I had to see what she was hiding. The next morning, I woke up before Clara, which was rare. I just lay there for a while, watching her sleep, wondering if she could feel me staring at her and if, in some twisted way, she was dreaming of him instead of me. My stomach turned as I quietly slid out of bed, grabbed my jacket, and sat in the kitchen, pretending to scroll through my phone until she woke up. She smiled at me like nothing in the world was wrong, like we weren't living on opposite sides of some massive secret. It was infuriating how natural she made it look. When she said she was going to run some errands, my pulse spiked. I'd heard that phrase before, but now it felt like a loaded gun aimed at my chest. I mumbled something about needing to stay home and catch up on emails, and she kissed me on the cheek, completely unsuspecting. As soon as she stepped out the door, I grabbed my keys and followed. I'm not proud of what I did that day, but I felt like I didn't have a choice anymore. I waited a minute or two before leaving, just enough so she wouldn't notice me in her mirror. I drove a couple of cars behind, keeping my distance, my hands sweating against the steering wheel. It felt insane, like something out of a bad movie, but my gut told me this was the only way I'd get the truth. She didn't go to the grocery store or the pharmacy like she said she would. Instead, she drove across town to this little cafe I'd never even heard of, tucked between an antique shop and a laundromat. She parked, got out, and walked straight inside with her phone in her hand, looking around like she was waiting for someone. My heart was pounding as I pulled over across the street and watched. A few minutes later, he arrived. Eli. I recognized him from one of the photos I'd seen on her phone. He was taller than me, casually dressed, with this confident smirk on his face that made my blood boil. I watched them sit down at a corner table. She smiled at him, the kind of smile I hadn't seen from her in months, and I felt this sharp, burning jealousy I can't even put into words. They were leaning close, talking like they were in their own little world. Then, at one point, she reached across the table and touched his hand. That simple gesture hit me harder than any punch could. I had to look away for a second, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I don't even remember how long I sat there watching them. 10 minutes? 30? It felt like hours. Every second was agony, like I was being forced to watch my own life unravel in real time. At one point, she laughed at something he said, and it was this soft, genuine laugh I hadn't heard from her in so long. That broke me more than anything else. I started wondering if maybe she'd been gone long before this, if maybe I'd lost her months ago and was just too blind to see it. When they left the cafe, they didn't drive away together, but they lingered in the parking lot, talking like they couldn't say goodbye. I watched Eli lean closer, whisper something, and she laughed again before touching his arm. It wasn't just some fling. There was something real there, and that realization hit me like a freight train. I drove home before she could see me, my chest tight, my hands shaking on the wheel. By the time she walked through the door, smiling like nothing happened, I felt like I was about to explode. But I didn't confront her, not yet. Not until I had more. That night, while she slept, I started writing everything down. Every detail, every message, every look. I knew I was getting close to something, but I had no idea just how dark it was going to get. The next day, I woke up with a pounding headache that had nothing to do with sleep. I couldn't look at Clara without seeing him, his face, his hands on hers, the way her eyes lit up when she looked at him. I had this feeling, this sharp, gnawing instinct, that if I didn't act now, I'd lose every chance to know the full truth. It wasn't just about the messages anymore. Something about the way she smiled when she was texting, the way she slipped out of the room to answer calls, it all felt orchestrated, like there was a side to her life I'd never been allowed to see. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was the guy on the outside of the glass, staring at a world I wasn't part of. I waited for her to go to work, kissed her goodbye like a coward, and the second she left, I tore through our home. I wasn't looking for anything specific, but I felt like there had to be something, some proof. My hands were shaking as I checked drawers, coat pockets, even the glove compartment in her car. It felt wrong, but my gut told me it was worse to stay blind. And then I found it. It was a crumpled receipt stuffed into the pocket of one of her jackets from a hotel downtown. A room booked just 2 nights ago. The timestamp hit me like a bullet because I remembered that night. She had said she was working late and would crash at Naomi's place to avoid driving home tired. My stomach twisted so hard I had to sit down. This wasn't just innocent texting. She was meeting him. I could feel it in my bones. I didn't stop there. I went to our laptop, the one we both used, and started checking the browser history. Most of it was cleared, which was suspicious in itself, but she'd missed a few things. Searches like boutique hotels near downtown and romantic dinner reservations. I clicked through a few links and felt my chest tighten more with every discovery. The worst part? I realized this had been going on longer than I thought. Weeks, maybe months. By the time Clara came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying not to look like my entire world had just caught fire. She walked in, smiling, humming some song like she had no idea she was shattering me into pieces. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam the receipt down in front of her and demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I just asked how her day was. My voice didn't even sound like mine anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, watching her out of the corner of my eye, wondering how much of what we had left was even real. I grabbed my phone at 2 a.m. and went back through her social media accounts, looking for anything. That's when I noticed a pattern. Old posts and photos she'd quietly untagged or removed. Places she'd claimed to be with friends, but where I now saw subtle signs of Eli. It was like finding ghosts in plain sight. I felt like I was drowning. Every new thing I uncovered was pulling me deeper under. But I couldn't stop. I needed to know how deep this went, even if it destroyed me. By the time the sun rose, I had made up my mind. I was done just watching from the shadows. I was going to dig until I hit the bottom, no matter how ugly it got. I woke up that morning with a strange kind of clarity, the kind that only comes when you've been pushed so far past your limit that you no longer care about the consequences. I wasn't going to keep playing this quiet, tortured game of waiting for answers that might never come. I needed proof, not just scraps of text messages or hotel receipts, but something undeniable, something that would force her to look me in the eye and admit what she'd done. I couldn't keep living in this limbo where every smile she gave me felt like a lie, and every time her phone buzzed, it was a reminder that I was no longer enough for her. I knew she was meeting someone that evening. It wasn't a guess or a suspicion. It was the way she spent the entire morning glued to her phone, sending messages she wouldn't let me see, her expression flickering between excitement and something that looked like guilt. She left earlier than usual, claiming she needed to pick up something from a friend, but I didn't believe a word of it. I waited 15 minutes after she drove off, grabbed my keys, and followed her. I stayed far enough back that I wouldn't be noticed, my heart pounding every time we stopped at a red light. I felt like I was driving straight into the end of my marriage, but I couldn't stop myself. She pulled into a parking garage downtown, and I parked a few levels below, my hands shaking as I waited for her to get out of sight. Then I saw him. Eli. He was leaning against his car like he belonged there, like he knew she was coming. She walked right up to him, smiling in that way that cut me deeper than any words could. He put his hand on her back as they walked out together, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I followed them on foot, staying half a block behind. Every step felt like my chest was caving in, like my ribs were breaking one by one. They went into a quiet, upscale restaurant, a place we used to go when things were good between us. I stood across the street, watching them through the window like a ghost. The way she leaned in when she talked to him, the way her eyes lit up, the way her hand brushed against his on the table. It was like watching a version of Clara I didn't even recognize. That laughter, the soft tilt of her head, those used to be mine. Something inside me broke. I pulled out my phone and started recording them, my hands trembling so hard I could barely keep it steady. I didn't even know why I was doing it. Was it to confront her later? To have proof that I wasn't crazy? Or maybe just to hold on to the last shred of control I had left? At one point, he reached across and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and I had to bite down on the inside of my cheek to stop myself from storming in there and making a scene. I stayed outside for over an hour, pacing, shaking, watching them like I was the invisible third wheel in their perfect little dinner. When they finally left, they didn't notice me trailing behind them back to the garage. They laughed as they walked to their cars, completely oblivious to the man just a few feet away whose world they were tearing apart. I drove home before she did, parked a block away, and sat there in my car staring at the steering wheel for what felt like hours. My chest felt heavy, like something had died inside me. When Clara finally came home, she looked at me with those calm, casual eyes and asked how my evening had been, as if she hadn't just been out with him. I smiled. I don't know how, but I smiled and said nothing. But that night, I lay awake with a new kind of fire burning in me. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to rip this secret wide open. I needed to see how far she'd gone, even if it left me with nothing but ashes. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I'd spent the night tossing and turning, thinking about every message, every laugh, every lie that had buried itself between us. But instead of anger, I felt something else, a strange, hollow calm. I realized that if I didn't confront her now, I would rot from the inside out. So when Clara came into the kitchen, looking as serene as ever, I asked her to sit down. My voice didn't shake this time. She looked at me, confused at first, but then I placed the hotel receipt on the table. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse her. I just said, I know, Clara. I know about Eli. I saw the messages. I saw you with him. My words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at me like the world had stopped spinning. Then, to my shock, she broke down in tears. What I heard next wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a confession of some deep romantic affair, but rather a story about someone she had known years ago, a friend from her past who had reappeared out of nowhere when she was going through a rough time. She swore it hadn't gone as far as I thought. Yes, there had been texting, maybe flirting, but she claimed it was more about nostalgia and confusion than love. She admitted she was wrong, that she had felt lonely in ways she didn't know how to explain to me, and that Eli had been someone she leaned on when she didn't know how to talk to me anymore. I sat there, silent, torn between anger and the faintest flicker of understanding. I told her how I'd been feeling invisible, how I'd watched her drift away and hadn't known how to stop it. For the first time in months, we actually talked, really talked. Not about bills or groceries or schedules, but about what was broken between us. And the more we spoke, the more I realized how much pain we'd both been hiding. That day, we made a choice. Not to sweep it under the rug, but to face it head on. Clara deleted Eli's number in front of me, blocking him from every platform, and promised to cut all ties. But I didn't just want promises, I wanted change. I told her I needed honesty, and she told me she needed me to be present, to notice her, to see her like I did when we first met. It wasn't instant forgiveness. It wasn't magic. But that night, we sat on the couch together for the first time in ages. No phones, no distractions, just us. We stayed up until dawn talking, laughing about old memories, and even crying about the things we'd both let slip. It felt raw, but it also felt real. Now, weeks later, I can say this, we're trying. And for the first time, I feel like maybe we're stronger because we hit this breaking point. We started going on walks together again, like that night when I saw the message that broke me. But now, when her hand slips into mine, I feel like it's for real. There's no secret smile, no buzzing phone to pull her away. Just us, facing the hard parts together. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in months, I'm not afraid of it. Because I know she's choosing me, and I'm choosing her, every single day.